Patrick, great work. Great work. This whole process is exactly what I've done to learn, and it takes a little bit of time, but you're on the right path. And a lot of it involves just looking deeply, trying to categorize what actions different types of hands do, and making sure your ranges are on point. So first of all, looking at your PO solve, the button or the cutoff range looks pretty good. In positions range looks reasonable as well. Um, the only comment on that is you did want some help with turns, and for us to get um, reasonable responses with turn betting, you're going to want to have a small sizing like 30% on the turn for out of position, so that because it's a sizing that out of position chooses quite often. Um, Main goals to develop GTO and exploited range per heroes out of positions action on this type of board. Um, yeah, the first area that's a little interesting is that it looks like this is c-bet right here, and checking is 55%, so betting is 45%, but you say it's about 25%. As you can see, we're choosing generally the large size with the polarized version of our range. Jacks Plus, etc. Smaller sizings for 10x and 9x's, and even the 9x's tend to prefer to check. Um, and then you said we're c-betting overcards with backdoors. Totally, yep. Hands, basically the c-bet bluffs tend to be hands that have some possibility of improving. Um, but we can't really check call with them, or would rather not check call with them. Open-ended straight draws, usually open-ended straight draws and flush draws tend to be usually in both categories most of the time. I mean, it doesn't really matter what you do, just don't fold them. But in general, it looks like you're saying that here we're choosing our best flush draws. Sometimes I like to bet our worst flush draws too. Um, Although, or maybe even, it depends. It really depends. Um, or let's see. I wish we had a you had given me your your PO. I would have guessed here that we would bet more of our middle flush draws and check raise our absolute best. Let's see. It looks like we're actually doing the opposite here. Yeah, it's hard to come up with an exact rule. Definitely the blockers matter here. We're check raising a lot of the rest of the overpairs. Um, some decent top pairs with backdoors. A lot of the sets, etc. We're check calling middle, so condensed. And then we're folding just the total junk that just can't hit anything. That's usually right. How to respond to villain after hero out of position check raises. If in position reshoves on out of position's check raise, out of position continues with two pair plus and flush draws. Makes sense. Although I suspect we're probably check raise folding our worst flush draws, or are we check raise folding any flush draw with this stack depth? We might not be check raise folding all flush draws. So that'd be my first question here is, are there any folds with flush draws after we check raise? If in position calls heroes check raise, continuation on the turn. I alluded to how to play turns on the top, but we'll get deeper into this at another time. Um, okay, if in position is raising our C bet after out of position has bet, yeah, this is really dependent. I bluff raise a lot of trash that I don't want to call with. Not everyone does though. but it's mainly me attacking the fact that out of position players bet too often. Yeah, when I looked in your CREV, it looks like we actually cannot jam some of those bluffs. This seems a bit, yeah, it seems a bit wide to be jamming the overcards with backdoors. Although it really depends on how often you win the pot and get folds. One of the wonderful things about flush draws is you're usually somewhere between 35 and 45% equity when called, depending on your additional outs. So if your opponents are folding ever, um, they just become really nice semi bluffs because you have such when called, you're you're good to go anyway, or you're not losing that much. So I'm just going to go through your Card Runners EV file real quick, and hopefully this will have answered some of your questions. First thing is the ranges look good-ish. Yeah, looks fine to me. I think, yeah, I mean, this strategy doesn't look so bad. Although, as you can see, just betting overcards is going to win money in this pot when that's not what should really happen usually. So if this is the case, where something like, um, Ace King offsuit is just going to win money, print money on the spot pretty much because in position is just not raising very much and folding 25% of the time. Um, then we should be switching to a bet a lot strategy if the imposition player is folding this often. And it's not even that often that imposition is folding, but yeah, we have them folding ace queen offsuit, 8-7 definitely should not ever be folding, 6-7 not so sure. So have some problems with this, but it's not a bad way of looking at it. I mean, this is a pretty for the most part, people do overfold in position, which is why out of position c-bets work so often. You were concerned with this flop 3-bet shove. When I ran it here, it sure did look like it wasn't doing that well. Yeah. So because in position's calling when we shove so often and very rarely folding, this flop 3-bet bluff is not working so much. Now, if you put some more bluffs in this range and this was folding more, then these bluffs would go up in value. So let's look at the checking range real quick. Since it's tough to really go into this check down, we're mainly looking at the check raise. By the way, this is actually pretty nice to see. The last thing I wanted to say was that it actually kind of looks like we're defending maybe a little too much after c-betting versus a raise, since we're just like only folding 20% of the time. Ignore that. So I'm just kind of going into how I would look at some of these spots. My first kind of issue is it looks like you're only betting. Yeah, in position. Yeah, so this is our checking range, it's fine. So in position, right now what we're looking at is in position betting, float betting, versus out of positions check. 50% seems like a reasonable amount, but it looks like you only said top pair without backdoors, which is fine, but I'm not so sure if I agree with that. Looks like we have I mean, this is okay. This is a reasonable check down range, I suppose. Let's see. Now here, shoving the flush draws in the top pair plus backdoor with especially the ace highs is going to work since we're check raise calling so many flush draws in this case. So that's fine. Um, we can't really analyze this spot since we're not going to see future streets. Yeah, we'll have to talk about turn play at another time. Overall, pretty interesting. What's most important is playing around with this kind of stuff, seeing what happens if you add more bluffs, what bluffs have the highest equity, and trying to figure out why. Overall, very complicated stuff, even complicated for my kind of analysis. But I promise you, the more you do this, the more edge you're going to have on your opponent. Hopefully, you found this helpful. Thanks.